Welcome back. Let's continue from our last video. In the previous video, you saw Ernest and Dane found themselves trapped in the mysterious mystic garden. As they searched for a way out, Dane sensed a familiar energy, one he recognized as the ancient magic of Archana. Trusting his instincts, Dane urged Ernest to follow him, confident that he knew the path to escape from this magical trap. Ernest said excitedly that Dane had found the way. However, the place Dane led him to was entirely different. They had reached the center of the misty garden. Ernest gasped in surprise, looking at the fountain in front of them. Turning back to Dane, he couldn't help but notice the stunned expression on Ernest's face. It was clear that Ernest knew something, so Dane quickly asked what it was, if there was something special about this place. In response, Ernest's eyes widened even further in disbelief, exclaiming that of course most students came to the Misty Garden for this exact reason. Then, as if suddenly realizing something, he let out an awe and continued asking Dane not to tell him he didn't know the legend of this place. Dane, who barely knew anything about this school to begin with, could only shake his head, questioning if this place actually had a legend. Seeing his reaction, Ernest took a deep breath and explained that there was a legend that said if you reached this spot before the mist cleared, you would be reunited with the person you desired most. Dane, upon hearing this, immediately lost interest, muttering to himself with a sigh that it was another one of those cliché love stories, before shrugging and continuing questioning that if getting here was this difficult, then how did it even work? At that, Ernest's curiosity seemed to be piqued as well, and he nodded in agreement, stating that Dane was right, it was strange. Dane then turned his gaze toward the fountain in front of them, staring at it intently before voicing his thoughts that if no one was constantly supplying it with mana, could there really be a power source strong enough to sustain itself indefinitely? As soon as those words left Dane's mouth, Ernest's eyes widened again, this time in revelation, exclaiming that if that was the case, then this entire garden might actually be one giant mechanism. Dane nodded in agreement, elaborating further that given how unnecessarily complex and intricate this garden's layout was, that could very well be the truth. Ernest, now filled with excitement, added that then that meant if this garden was an ancient mechanism, this magical fountain could be some kind of artifact from the past. Meanwhile, Dane had his own thoughts forming in his mind, thinking that maybe the mist itself was connected to it, that feeling he was certain of it now. It was as if something inside the fountain was responding to him, like reuniting with an old friend. This was ancient magic, Dane silently concluded, reaching out to touch the fountain, carefully feeling the energy emanating from it. Then all of a sudden, Ernest noticed something inside the fountain. Ancient symbols were carved into the stone. His eyes widened in shock as he gasped, asking Dane to wait a minute, stating that this was the ancient secret language. Ernest adjusted his glasses and nodded eagerly, confirming that was right. At first he wasn't sure since he couldn't see clearly, but now that he was touching it, he was certain this was the language of the long-forgotten secret kingdom. Hearing this, Dane couldn't hide his amazement, asking if Ernest even knew about this. Ernest replied that of course he was from the Dylan family and learning ancient languages was essential for explorers like them, explaining that it would be frustrating to imagine reaching ancient ruins but not being able to read anything. He added that he hadn't mastered every language yet, but he had learned this one from his father when he was little, asking if he could try deciphering it. Ernest's eyes sparkled with excitement, his entire face lighting up with enthusiasm. He was so eager that he even pulled out a notebook and a pen to start taking notes without waiting for Dane's approval, diving straight into the translation, his passion for discovery burning like a wildfire. Dane could only watch and chuckle to himself, thinking that Ernest's explorer instincts had just kicked into overdrive. And so time began to pass as Ernest focused all his intellect on deciphering the ancient inscription on the fountain. He mumbled to himself as he worked, noting that this word meant worthiness, and this one. He paused, then exclaimed he got it, piecing the words together. His eyes suddenly widened in excitement as he announced to Dane that he had cracked it. Dane immediately turned to him, asking if he really had and what it said. Without hesitation, Ernest handed over his notebook and proudly announced that those who are worthy shall prove their strength. It was an enigmatic phrase, leaving Dane slightly puzzled, wondering if worthy and prove could be referring to ancient magic. For some reason, the closer he got to the center of this place, the more familiar it felt. Dane mulled over the thought in his head. Meanwhile, Ernest seemed to be contemplating the same thing, musing that it was funny because if worthiness here referred to ancient power, then there was no way anyone could qualify. Dane simply gave a faint smile and thanked Ernest. Then Dane focused his inner strength into the bracelet he and Old Man Sidrain had obtained earlier. From Ernest's perspective, watching Dane suddenly channel his power into something with such intent made him immediately ask what Dane was doing. Dane didn't respond, instead remaining deep in thought, thinking that they said runes held power simply through their form, and if he used this bracelet it might trigger a reaction. And just as he predicted, the ancient inscriptions engraved on the bracelet began to glow. Ernest shouted in surprise that strange markings were appearing on the bracelet. Then Dane extended his hand forward as if responding to him, and the bracelet detached itself from his wrist, floated toward the fountain, and began to resonate with it. the ground beneath them trembled violently. Ernest cried out in shock, questioning what the hell was going on, stating that it was shaking like crazy and asking Dane what he had just done, noting that the fountain was sinking into the ground. Meanwhile, Dane couldn't suppress the excitement surging through him, thinking to himself that yes, that was the right answer all along. By now even a fool could tell what was happening. The mist was disappearing too. Activating an ancient artifact this easily, the worthy one the fountain's inscription spoke of. Was it actually Dane? Ernest found himself staring at Dane as if trying to decipher exactly who his friend really was. But before he could dwell on it any further, a massive blue crystal in front of them suddenly erupted with a dazzling light. Seeing this, Dane quickly called out to Ernest to look. Something was glowing at the center. Ernest snapped out of his thoughts and focused his gaze forward, and then both of them stood their mouths agape in awe, exclaiming that it was beautiful and looked like a gemstone, which must be the power source of the fountain. Ernest's voice was filled with realization, and Dane agreed with this assessment, adding that maybe it was also the cause of all the strange phenomena in this garden. Dane then calmly stated that they were about to face ancient power. Then beneath Dane's feet, a complex magic circle appeared, radiating an intense energy. Dane extended his hand, feeling the powerful force emanating from it. He thought about this power, this ancient magic, realizing it was the same as the power he possessed. His eyes locked onto the ancient script inscribed on the crystal, and a realization struck him. Arcana had once existed and was destroyed, and this was its legacy. He was amazed that he could understand the ancient language that he couldn't read before, concluding that this was truly the legacy of the Arcana Magic Kingdom, and that meant he had already absorbed its power. Dane exclaimed in excitement. However, just a second later, a sharp pain erupted in his chest, forcing him to clutch at it. He internally screamed about his heart hurting, all of a sudden sensing something happening to it. Before he could fully grasp what was occurring, he sensed it inside his heart. A magic circle was forming. Dane questioned himself about this magic circle, noting that the core in the circle and their roles completely opposed each other. He knew that having both was incredibly rare, and that this combination was inefficient and could even damage the body, explaining why magic swordsmen always had heart problems. He reflected that he never wanted to form a circle meant solely for magic, but he never expected it to be forcibly implanted into his heart. A deep sigh escaped him, and worry clouded his face so visibly that even Ernest noticed immediately. Turning toward him, Ernest asked with a voice thick with concern if he was really okay, noting that he had been looking pale the whole time. Not wanting to make his friend worry, Dane forced a weak smile and waved his hand dismissively, saying not to worry, he was just thinking too much. Hearing this, Ernest hesitated for a few seconds, studying Dane's expression. In the end, he chose not to press further and gave a small nod, adding that he was still in shock too, but the power Dane had just absorbed, the mist, the ancient script, it all seemed connected to him. Switching back to Dane's perspective, Ernest's curiosity didn't surprise him much. Of course, his friend had countless questions. He had just witnessed everything unfold before his eyes. Dane thought he should get a better grasp of the situation first. With that in mind, he conveniently shifted all responsibility to his older sister, saying he was just following what his sister taught him and didn't really know the details either. Ernest replied with a grin that if Dane ever figured it out, he should let him know. Dane nodded in agreement as they left the mysterious garden behind. Ernest reflected on everything they had been through that day, his excitement unmistakable as he shared his thoughts, saying that today felt like his blood was boiling, and this was exactly the thrill of an adventurer. Ernest then asked Dane if he wanted to explore the Academy's mysteries with him, suggesting they could share any strange phenomena or secret places they discovered. Dane responded with a bright smile that sounded fun, a small sense of anticipation sparking within him. Perhaps there were even more places like this one brimming with magic. Then, as if suddenly remembering something important, Ernest exclaimed for Dane to wait. Hadn't he said he had a class coming up? That reminder made Dane jolt in realization, his class he had completely forgotten. He patted Ernest on the shoulder before dashing off, agreeing that Ernest was right and apologizing for having to go, telling him he would see him later. Ernest chuckled, watching Dane's figure gradually shrink into the distance, a thoughtful expression crossing his face. He mused that Dane really was an interesting friend, and if he kept exploring with him, something amazing was bound to happen, adding that he couldn't wait. Meanwhile, Dane was sprinting across the academy grounds like a gust of wind. Yet as he moved, he began noticing strange sensations within his body. He wondered why running felt so much easier than before. Despite having both a core and a magic circle, an unstable combination that should disrupt energy flow, he felt no discomfort. Normally, the presence of a circle would interfere with mana from the core, making it inefficient, but now, no matter how much mana he generated, he didn't feel anything unusual. No, it was actually the opposite. The mana circulated through the circle, then somehow got drawn back into the core. Not only that, but the mana in his core felt purer than ever before. Dane thought to himself that this was incredible and he needed to contact his sister. Time quickly passed and the scene transitioned to a remote territory located in a desert region. This was Hangston District. At this moment Dane, along with countless students from the Royal Academy, had gathered here for an unknown reason. Standing beside Dane, his close friend Layla excitedly commented that so this was the famous Hangston District she had heard so much about, pointing out the entrance before them. There stood a massive gate. Layla let out a gasp of admiration as she gazed upon it, stating that this must be the legendary magic barrier. Magic barrier? Dane echoed, his voice filled with curiosity. Hearing this, Layla immediately realized that Dane had absolutely no clue about what he was looking at. With a bright smile, she eagerly explained that it was created by Saul Hangston, a legendary mage of the academy. She continued that this barrier activated once a year specifically for freshmen with magical talent, and when someone passed through it, the barrier revealed a color based on their magic's quality and level. She further explained that originally this was designed to detect and eliminate dark mages trying to infiltrate the academy, but after dark mages went extinct it was repurposed for this. Thinking about this, Dane's face lit up with excitement as he eagerly asked what each color represented. Layla, ready with an answer, explained smoothly that if someone had no talent, no color would appear at all. If they had decent talent, the color was yellow. If their talent was significant, the color was blue, and if they had overwhelming talent, it turned red. She spoke so fluently that Dane couldn't help but be impressed. He turned to her with admiration and said that she really knew her stuff. Hearing that, Layla playfully winked and responded with pride that of course she wanted to know everything about the academy. Then, as if remembering something important, she added that by the way, all of Dane's sisters got red anyway. Layla then confidently stepped through the gate, stating she would go first. As expected, the shimmering aura around the entrance turned bright red, proving her overwhelming talent. Layla cheered with excitement that it was red, adding that it was incredible. Dane nodded in agreement. Layla grinned, raising a fist in triumph, saying that at least she was good enough for this much. Watching her, Dane couldn't suppress his curiosity. He had to test himself. All right, my turn, he declared, stepping toward the gate. Even before entering, he had already made some assumptions, thinking it was probably going to be red. After all, he had absorbed ancient magic, so maybe he would be even stronger than normal. That was what he thought, but the result was completely unexpected. The color that appeared wasn't red, it wasn't blue, it wasn't even yellow. Instead, the light shining from the gate was green. Seeing the unusual glow, both Dane and Layla froze. Dane wondered aloud what the hell green was. Layla exclaimed with wide eyes in shock that there was no ranking for green. Dane let out a nervous chuckle, agreeing that seriously, even he had no idea what was happening. That's a wrap. The story continues in my next video. Like and subscribe to stay notified.